The dawn mist clung to the battlefield like the ghosts of the fallen, swirling around the corpses of peasants and nobles alike. Among the carnage of broken spears and trampled banners, one figure remained standing: Takeshi. His once pristine armor now a grotesque tapestry of blood and mud, his notched sword trembling with exhaustion in his grip. The enemy lay in heaps around him, their crimson life seeping into the earth to nourish next season's rice. But the battle was not over. Across the field, the earth trembled as the warlord's champion emerged, a mountain of flesh and iron. His black lacquered armor, etched with scenes of demons feasting on the unworthy. His massive tachi, longer than a man was tall, gleamed with the promise of death as he dragged it through the mud, leaving a trail like a serpent's belly in the dirt. The two warriors circled, their breaths ragged plumes in the morning chill. Their eyes locked in a contest of wills that predated their steel. The champion struck first, his blade cutting the air with a sound like a screaming bird, the force of it parting the mist itself. Takeshi barely dodged, feeling the wind of the strike against his cheek. As strands of his topknot fluttered to the ground, he countered, his own sword biting deep into the champion's thigh, parting chainmail like rotten cloth. Blood sprayed in a hot arc, painting the trampled grass, but the giant did not falter. A backhanded blow from the champion's armored fist sent Takeshi sprawling into the mud. His ribs screamed in protest, one likely cracked, but he forced himself up, spitting dirt and blood in equal measure. His left eye was swelling shut already, the world narrowing to a tunnel of pain and purpose. They clashed again, their swords ringing like temple bells, calling the faithful to war. Takeshi's arms burned with fatigue, his shoulders screaming from 100 parries, but his spirit was unbroken. He feinted left, then pivoted on his rear foot, his blade finding the gap in the champion's armor slash across, the wrist that sent blood pulsing between the iron plates. The giant's fingers spasmed, his tachi falling into the muck with a sound like a dying man's last breath. But the champion was not finished. With a roar that shook the battlefield silent, he lunged, his armored fist crashing into Takeshi's jaw. Bone cracked. Vision blurred into a haze of gray and red. Takeshi tasted iron as he hit the ground again, his sword just out of reach, his fingers scrabbling in the blood-soaked earth. The champion loomed over him, drawing a wickedly curved tanto from his belt. The morning sun caught the inscription on the blade, a prayer to the god of war. "Die with honor," the giant growled, raising the dagger high. Takeshi's hand found a broken spear shaft, its splintered end as sharp as any blade. As the tanto descended, he thrust upward with every ounce of strength his failing body could muster. The jagged point pierced the champion's throat, punching through flesh and cartilage with a wet crunch. The giant staggered, his eyes wide with disbelief, his massive hands clutching at the wooden shaft protruding from his neck like some grotesque new limb. Then he toppled like a felled tree, his body shaking once before lying still, his blood mingling with that of the men he'd slain. Silence fell over the battlefield, broken only by the cawing of crows gathering for their feast. The remaining enemies fled, their morale shattered like pottery on stone. Takeshi stood, his body battered but unbowed, using his sword as a crutch to remain upright. His lord approached, placing a hand on his shoulder, the gesture saying what words could not, that this day had birthed something new in the world. As the sun climbed higher, burning away the mist, the peasants would whisper of what they'd seen, of how one man had stood against the storm and prevailed, of how honor and skill had triumphed over brute strength. That day, the first true samurai was born. The healers worked through the night to save Takeshi. 3 ribs were bound with silk. His shattered jaw was wired shut with gold thread. The wound in his side, unnoticed in the heat of battle, required 17 stitches of horsehair. When he finally awoke, it was to the sight of his lord's daughter kneeling at his bedside, carefully cleaning his sword with rice paper and oil. She did not speak as she worked, but the reverence in her touch spoke volumes. The blade, though notched and scarred, would live to fight again. Years later, when Takeshi fell at the Battle of Crimson Leaves, they buried him with his sword across his chest and his helmet at his feet. The poets would write of how the cherry blossoms fell that day like tears from heaven. But his true legacy lived on in the way young warriors trained until their hands bled. In the unbroken line of disciples who carried his teachings forward, in the very soul of what it meant to hold a sword with honor, And on quiet nights, when the wind howls across old battlefields and the moon hangs low like a lantern for lost souls, some swear they can still see two figures dancing in the mist there, blades flashing like silver fish in a stream, their cries echoing across the centuries. The first lesson, the last truth. The endless path of the warrior.